Hey, Moniece.
Hello, guys. How are you today?
Doing great. Thank you.
Good, good.
We're still a couple of minutes away, so I'm gonna wait, just in case NBC, ABC, MSNBC, Foxes, they may be tuning
Oh,
in.
absolutely. Absolutely. They would if they knew the speakers lineup we have today.
Mhm. With some of the stuff they had on there, this would be better than
That's right.
some of the stuff they had.
I guarantee it. Carrie, Ashley, and Dr. Fox, we're thrilled you guys could join us virtually and be a part of our meeting today. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Good to see everyone.
I'm glad to be here too. I'm gonna log off a second and back on to make sure I can share my screen, but I'll be right back.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Fox.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order, and again, since we have some of the members that are participating virtually, we will have to have a roll call vote on each vote. I will turn it over and do the roll call to begin though.
All right. Hal Bynum,
Yes.
Moniece Hagler,
Yes,
and Moniece, while I'm on it, are you alone?
I am alone.
Thank you, ma'am. Kelsey Coons? Here. Philip Smart?
Here.
Art Sparks?
Here?
Julie Wells is not able to join us. Johnny Wolford?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Julia called in this morning, and she was hoping she had a sinus issue and not COVID, but she went ahead and got tested and did not really feel well, so she told Edie that even if she tested negatively, she was not coming, and she really didn't feel well enough to get on the virtual, and we certainly understand that. We want to welcome everybody to this particular meeting. We obviously, Keith's already welcomed our people who will be speaking virtually. Glad to have him here. I want to note that the proceeds are open to the public, and they're streaming via the campus website. All material meetings have been posted on the advisory board website. I'm first going to call on Chancellor Carver to offer a word of welcome.
Just, again, thank you all for being here today. We are excited. I guess since our last meeting, we know that Art Sparks and Julia Wells were reappointed for 4-year terms to the board. We're excited about that. I'd like to congratulate those guys. We, just in terms of one quick update, I probably won't get to later, but something that's really important is we have a TVA investment challenge group out of the College of Business and Public Affairs. And we're always looking for something good and positive that's just happened that our students are doing to share with the board first. But I just want to tell you that we were in a national competition for students that take money that's given to us by the Tennessee Valley Authority. We invest it. It's all led by students, guided by certainly some great faculty. But our team this winter at UT Martin placed first among 27 other institutions, and those are institutions like University of Georgia, University of Arkansas, TCU, among others. And so we talk a lot about things that are going on, trends that are going on at UT Martin, but I always want to remind you all at the first meetings that it's really all about our students, and our students are absolutely doing some amazing things. And also, one of the students that was involved with that, Logan Webb, is also, that was a part of that winning team, also doubles as Captain Skyhawk. So you can know that if you have extra money in your pocket and you need some investment advice, our mascot can help you out. So anyway, but Art certainly wanted to pass that along. Thanks to you all for being here today, and thanks to our virtual guests.
That's great that they've done that well with the investment. I'm sure it's because of the investment that our staff and faculty make into those students that they're able to do that. I want to take a minute to welcome a new person. Ann Dorner is the new counsel for University of Tennessee at Martin. Really happy to have her, and especially with Keith at the helm. Well, I think we need a full-time counsel here at UTM just to sort of watch over and see what he's doing. And if you have any problems with Keith, you call me or Charlie, one of us will take care of it.
Okay, so far he's been really nice.
I have been.
Very, very happy to have you.
Thank you, I'm excited to be here.
She did take all my social media away.
All right, the next item of business is the approval of the minutes, which are located behind tab 1 and have been posted on the advisory board website. If you've looked through those, I will entertain a motion that they be accepted.
So moved.
Okay?
Second it.
We have a second. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Hearing none, I'll ask Edie to have a roll call vote.
Albino,
Yes.
Moniz Hagler,
Yes.
Kelsey Coons. Yes. Philip Smart,
Yes.
Art Sparks,
Yes.
Johnny Wolfer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is an economic forecast. Dr. Bill Fox, who is the Randy and Jenny Boyd Professor of the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research. There are some materials in your notebook that I'm sure he will refer to, but Dr. Fox, I'll turn it over to you. And you're on mute right now, I believe. And I think you're still on mute, Dr. Fox. Dr. Fox?
We muted too.
It said unmute, now you hear me?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
there you go.
Gotcha, thank you.
Push that unmute thing once, so I was trying to say nice things about Chancellor Carver, and it somehow muted.
I'm glad we didn't hear that.
Now, it is truly my privilege to participate today, so thank you for having me, and let me just say how much I admire and enjoy working on occasion with your Chancellor, and you all are very, very fortunate to have him there. And so, again, thank you to everyone for letting me participate. So I'm going to talk a bit about what's going on in the economy, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person to do it, but glad for the chance. And you know, I'm not going to worry very much about what's going to happen next academic year at Martin or any campus. I'm really taking a bit longer look here and saying, what are we doing, and is it the right thing as we see the kind of major transitions that are taking place in our economy? And so if it's okay, what I'll do is share some slides with you. I'm happy. I think we've left a few minutes at the end for questions, but if in the midst of this I say something that you need more on, or you want to push me on or disagree with me, I'm totally okay with being interrupted. Okay, so to start with, let's just, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but let's think about what yesterday's university looked like. I mean, the first thing we all wanted was a new building. We wanted to meet just a couple of times a week. I've been a faculty member of it. I know what this is like, and I don't want more than 40 students in my class. I want a bunch of people who think like me sitting around me, and I only want to have to work during semesters. And then what I really want is tenure and a professorship. And, you know, this was kind of the way we thought about academics. And then, of course, we expected state government to send us money to finance what we thought was important. And so that was kind of yesterday's world. And what I'm going to talk to you about is these 4 key disruptors that are impacting not just higher education, but certainly higher education. The first one is what's happening in government revenues. The second one is this whole range of transitions that are taking place. The third is technologies, and they're both on the input side, you know, how we make things, and on the output side, the stuff we get. And some of these transitions interact with the technologies. And then demographics, and all 4 of these are really impacting the way we do higher ed. And so, as I think about tomorrow's university, what it says to me for sure is it can't look like what I just described for you as yesterday's university. We're gonna have to be, and I've proposed this as questions, but the fact that I did tells you what I'm thinking. We're gonna have to be a lot more entrepreneurial. We need to recognize that our students are gonna care a lot about the economic benefits. And if our students don't, their parents will. And indeed, a lot of non-traditional students who are only gonna come to higher education because they're expecting economic benefits from it. And then we're gonna find, I think things like the role of buildings to shift and technology to become more important. Indeed, we used to say that the university was stationary and the students were mobile. I think in a lot of ways, we're gonna reverse that as we think about the next decade. The students aren't gonna be so mobile because a lot of them will be non-traditional students who have a life and a job and all the rest. And it's education that's more mobile. They don't have to go to Barton. They can choose from places all over the country or all over the world. And so does this mean more hybrid remote education? And then do we need to think about how do we offer education more flexibly? So the way I think about this is what we've done in higher education, and this may have made plenty of sense, I'm not trying to fault the past, but we've bundled together this package that says, okay, you want to be an accountant, or you want to work in agriculture, but to do that, we're going to expect you to take history and biology and a bunch of other things, and you're sitting there scratching your head. Why are we doing this? We've bundled all this package together, and will we find as there's increasing emphasis on the economic benefits and increasingly non-traditional students, are they going to be willing to have this product bundled, particularly since the private sector is offering plenty of non-bundled stuff? I think you all saw this in the Nashville paper a couple of months ago, but Amazon just reached an agreement with the Nashville Software School, which is this nonprofit kind of loose organization in Nashville. And what they've agreed to is Amazon's going to give the training and the education materials to the software school, and they're going to educate 50 coders a year to work at places like Amazon. Now, and you see this happening with accounting firms that just go through the list, and they're unbundling this for us. And so how do we compete in this world? So let me talk about tax revenues and government revenues first. Remember, I gave you 4 things I'm going to look at. First one was revenues, and this is Tennessee tax revenues as of actually last week. And I mean, the reason I have this time period here is 2003, back at the very beginning. That was at the end of the Sundquist administration when they did a whole bunch of tax rate increases to help us through the recession that had just completed. And I want you to see we are growing in terms of tax revenues much faster than we grew with all those tax rate increases. We have had extraordinary revenue growth so far, actually all through the COVID window. Commissioner Ely announced earlier this week, we had 24% sales tax revenue growth last month. To put this in perspective, this is a little bit old, but the points are still the same, and so I didn't read through it. This is a comparison not with a year ago, but with right before COVID. And we're seeing building materials, sales are up 50% by comparison with where they were. Auto dealers, they were absolutely super until chips got in the way, and so they haven't been quite as super. But essentially, every category of taxable consumption has grown at extraordinary rates over the last 2 years. And of course, what people did in part was they shifted away from stuff like a non-elective surgery and flying, and they shifted into stuff that Tennessee sales tax. Now, here's the question. As we shift from a pandemic to an endemic COVID, and we somehow revert back to the life we used to have, or some change the life we used to have, are we going to consume the way we did in terms of the way we spend money on goods and services and so forth relative to our income? And if we do, tax revenues are going to dramatically slow, and funding of higher education is going to get tight. And that's particularly going to be the case if the General Assembly decides, for example, to cut tax rates because there's so much money sloshing around right now, or we make massive increases in K-12 education. And I'm a big believer in K-12 education. Don't miss my point. But if we do lots of large recurring changes in government, then how does that play out when we go to a more traditional economy? And then the national government, of course, part of why consumers have been able to spend so much money is because we ran these massive deficits that turn around and hand money out to people. And they spent a lot of that money, and we sales taxed it, and that was great. Who believes that the federal government will continue to spend, particularly in ways that benefit higher education, going forward from here? And you see the deficits coming up at the endpoint. That's all about aging of the population and Social Security and Medicare. This is built into the system. All these people who are 60 years old are here, and we're gonna watch them age into Medicare and Social Security. So on the revenue side, counting on government seems increasingly less likely option for higher education. Thing number two is the transitions in the economy. And, there's just lots of these transitions taking place. You know them absolutely as well as I do. I'm just kind of observing as I look around me, but there's big changes in what we buy. And so, it's the smartphone, we can all put up our smartphones, and, these things are only less than 15 years old. It's the gaming that's taking place. Just go through the list of things, and what we buy is shifting. How we get it is shifting. Obviously, for a while we were going into stores, then we were ordering online, now we're ordering with our laptop, now we're doing it with our phone, and we're just driving by the Walmart or the Kroger store and picking it up. And so how we get goods and services. And of course, the next step that's on its way, in my view, is autonomous vehicles that bring the stuff to us. We don't even see the stores. The form of goods and services, we're digitizing things. And of course, now we digitize money, right? Think Bitcoin. We're digitizing wherever possible the stuff we get. And then, of course, how they're produced with technology. So then the question is, can we keep doing education the same way while everything around us is transitioning so rapidly? And what I fear, quite simply, is that our market share will fall. And I'm talking about higher education market share in most markets, as all these non-traditional service providers, offer MOOCs. At MIT, it's a higher education institution, but offering MOOCs to 100,000 or 150,000 students. Or do we need to rethink what we're doing? That doesn't mean there won't be traditional four-year degrees, but do there also need to be options associated with certificates and somehow stacking specific skills into liberal arts education, so that students, when they walk away with a degree, also have some things that directly and immediately translate into the labor force. COVID, of course, has accelerated all kinds of trends. Mostly I think what COVID did, in my view, we'll all learn this over the next 4 or 5 years, and if I can say anything about COVID, it played out totally differently from the way I anticipated. But I think it's mostly accelerated trends that were already underway and made them ever more present to us. And so the reduction in space in restaurants and retail, in offices, this is well underway. It's going to continue. Fewer workers in stores themselves, in restaurants, and in part because they can't get them, but in part because they're restructuring themselves. Go into a new McDonald's now, and you hardly find any workers in there as they brought AI and other kind of technology to bear in it. So less space. And again, are universities free from this, or do we need to be thinking about how we're using space efficiently? And then, of course, the technology that comes in, telemedicine. I did some of that during the earlier, more shutdown days, the teleoffice, the either true remote working or at least hybrid working, well underway and growing. And how does this fit into education? A significant delay, at least, in the seamless entrance of students into higher education. So when I mean seamless, from high school directly into college, this is 3 recessions, to give you a perspective on what happened, and what happened the first year out into it. And it's gotten much worse now if we go in and look at the 21-22 academic year, but this gives you the idea. After the Great Recession, or as it was going on, we got a significant increase in the number of students going to higher ed, particularly in 2-year schools. In the previous one, 2001 era, we had about this continual growth, consistent with the growth of the student bodies. during COVID, we actually got a dramatic reduction in the number of students in higher education. And that chart is a national chart. Our two-year schools in Tennessee down 23% in the number of seamless entrants, extraordinary reduction in workers. And so my last point on what COVID has accelerated is, okay, and I'm gonna show you some more on this as we get a little later into our discussion, but essentially what's happening in the economy is the shortage of workers is among the modest skilled workers. And what COVID did was it accelerated retirements, and it's causing a lot of what I'm talking about. It also brought some modest income workers out of the labor force, I think particularly in two-worker households with children. And I'm thinking that a lot of this never goes back again. Now, what it also means is there's a shortage of those kind of workers kind of forever. And so what we're gonna see is the wages of non-college educated workers rising relative, I'm not saying higher than, but rising relative to college education. And that's gonna, I think, shift the willingness of students to go to higher education and make it, you know, while it's still our elite students will go, I think you'll see increasingly students sitting and saying, wait a minute, does it make sense for me to take 4 years out of my life and go to school rather than getting a certificate or something and moving forward? Then the third thing is technology and how it's playing out. And the key message I want to say here is this is a chart that shows you how long it took to adapt to various technologies over the last 100 years. And I think the message you should see looking at that chart is the verticalness of the more recent technologies. Things are adopted very, very quickly. Again, think of smartphones. They started in 2007, and every one of us had one by 2009. I'm sitting here with 2 of them. Some of you probably are as well. And I mean, the adoption rate was extraordinary. By comparison, it took 75 years to get telephones into the economy. You know, cars, the same kind of thing. Nothing is like that in today's economy. The example I've been paying most attention to is vehicles and mobility in the economy. About 3% of our workforce in Tennessee is making cars. A third of those are assembling them, and as you, I'm sure, are aware, we have a plant in Chattanooga and a couple of them near Nashville, and we will soon have one near Memphis. So 4 manufacturers in Tennessee. But most of these people traditionally have been making parts. A third of them have been assembling, 2/3 have been making parts. The thing is that electric cars, where we're headed, and fortunately Tennessee is doing a great job of keeping the manufacturers in that area. You know, the electric cars use so many fewer parts. The guy who runs BMW recently said, a couple of years ago, said there's 1,800 parts in an internal combustion engine vehicle and 18 in an electric car. It's just a little electric engine that runs, in many cases, just right directly through the tire. And the outcome is going to be a lot of people making parts aren't going to have a job anymore. Or if they have one, it will be making batteries or making the smart components to autonomous cars. And so, you know, what we're getting here, electric and I think in the not too distant future, autonomous vehicles using very different employment. But the other thing to notice here is almost 5% of us support cars. Think of people who sell them, repair them, finance them, just go through the list, insure them, and many of those are, in my view, likely to go away. Many of those jobs and functions as autonomous cars are actually owned in fleets. And then finally, you know, almost 1 out of 7 of us, in some way or another, is using a vehicle really intensely in how we do our job. Now, there's the obvious, the truck driver, the Uber driver. That's the only thing they need is a vehicle. But as you go through the economy, whether it's a plumber or the trash truck, you know, the ambulances, police cars, vehicles really important for the way these jobs are done. And my point is, here's 1 out of every 5 of us that have had jobs in this traditional industry that over the next decade or 2 are going to see massive transition in either their job itself, going away in some cases, or how it's done, requiring different kind of education, different kind of training. Great example, but by no means the only one, of how these technology changes are impacting us. How does higher education get ahead of this? Help the many workers who are gonna be impacted, get either by losing their job or needing to be totally reskilled. And then the final thing is demographics. And here, first thing is just how fast are we growing? And the most recent decade, the slowest growing decade essentially in history, about the same as right after the Great Recession back in the 30s, a very unique time period in history. So growing much, much more slowly. This shows you by state how we stack up Tennessee. And we grew a little faster than normal. Now, growth rate of population is simple. It's births minus deaths plus migration. So to grow a little faster mostly says, we had a few more in-migrants than the average state in the U.S. Immigration itself from outside the country being increasingly modest in the U.S. over the last decade. And so we did a little better. But notice how it's stacked up in Tennessee, and I'm thinking about, again, Martin and what's happening in your area. Far and away, the population growth, and you didn't need me to come on and tell you this, you knew this, the population growth is fastest around Nashville, including up into Clarksville. It tends to be urban, though not so much as we look at the rest of the state, but not in Shelby County, for example, or up in much of northeast Tennessee. But in rural places, it's pretty consistent. Most rural areas are seeing very slow population growth. Now, I just told you, population growth comes from births minus deaths plus migration. And so the first part of that is, well, what's happening birth rates? The answer is they are falling and falling and falling. And this only goes to 2019. It's much lower in 2020 during the first year of COVID. Birth rates incredibly low with lots of implications for Tennessee and the country. Now, this chart ought to scare you to death as you think about Martin. This is a look at, now as we think about low birth rates and how this plays out, this is a look at how many children under 18 existed in each county in 2020 by comparison with 2010. And Weakley County had 630 fewer kids in 20 than it had in 10. So as we think about traditional students coming into the labor force, the number is pretty small in many parts of the state. 65 counties had fewer people under 18 in 2020 than they did a decade earlier. Low birth rates play out in very important ways in the public services we provide, the needs we have, and so forth. And then the other end of the scale is aging. And this shows you, the darker it is, the older the population. You think, well, just Maine and Florida, those are retirement places. We got lots of old people. 2030, this is what it looks like. The population everywhere is aging. And as I already noted, that impacts Medicare, and that impacts Social Security, but it impacts higher education as well as the population is increasingly aged. And so this is what happens. You put all this together. The blue line shows you the share of the population that's older, and we continue to age as a country even after the baby boom. The red line shows you what happens to the number of people who are traditional entrants into higher education. And the green line shows us what happens to our traditional labor force. And you can see that only the old share of the population is growing. This understates, this was done by the Census Bureau, that the data was done, and they understate what's happening on the younger side. This gets even more extreme than this chart seems to suggest. And so what we have is a modest number of workers relative to having to take care of the young folks and the old folks, and they need to be skilled up. Now, this is the second really scary chart for higher education. Now, here's what we're looking at. We're saying, okay, that we just saw that the share of the population that is working is going to keep shrinking. But as we think about the education level of the population, effectively what happens going forward from here is the number of people with less than a bachelor's degree literally falls. This is what I was saying before, is we're in a situation in which the shortage of workers is going to be people in jobs that require certificates and different kinds of trainings, not in total in the number of people with the BA, which grows quite fast. Big part of that, part of it is we're just educating a lot of people, but part of it is the retirees are less educated than the new labor force. You know, people my age didn't have the same level of education as today. And so again, what we're gonna see is the relative wages growing for those folks at the modest skill part of the economy. I'll just note that the population is increasingly heterogeneous and changing dramatically to where it will be in the U.S. about half white by 2030 and about half people of color. The male-female percentages, Chancellor Carver, I took a moment to look at your all's website and various data you put out. I noticed that 60% or so of your students are female. That's great. Let me clearly applaud that. I'm wondering where the males are though. And so it's not that I want to discourage females. I am worrying about males, and it's increasingly an issue in terms of workforce and how we skill up males in our economy. So where does this leave us? It leaves us not falling off a cliff. And that's actually, I think, part of the problem. We just have this slow erosion taking place. I think the University of Tennessee campuses are going to be affected really differently by this process. UTK is probably better protected for the next few years relative to other campuses, but ultimately we'll hit all campuses. We're going to have fewer non-traditional students and a more competitive market. That is a lot of other firms coming into the market, other private offerers of education, including companies just training their own workers, but also the ability to deliver education more remotely will play in. And yet resources are going to be tight. Change is underway really quickly. And it's clear people no longer fill their tank once and they're done, like was kind of the thought when I went to school. What's going to happen is we're going to have to, all workers, fill their tank really, really often going forward from here. Then I'll just, okay, so what do we do differently? Well, I think we need to rethink the delivery model. We need to recognize, in my view, that it's not enough to just change advising, job placement, the things outside the classroom. We may need to think more about how we change education and the people we're educating to be more flexible, to be more customer focused, and to broaden out from just this bundled package. So that's what I came to say to you. I don't know that it's an optimistic view for higher education, but I think it's, all we have to do, like the rest of the world, is recognize that the things around us are changing, and we need to adapt to the world as it changes. Be happy to respond to questions or disagreements or comments.
Questions from the group?
All right, I'm a CPA that has a CPA firm. How does your model work for me to be able to get people to come work for me? Because we struggle with that. And we're in 4 states, and we really struggle with it in all locations.
I'm gonna unshare here so I can just have a look at everybody. So what I think is gonna happen in areas like CPAs, as you know, technology is increasingly able to play a role that you might have had a more formal accountant play in the past. So I think, first of all, that's gonna continue to take place in accounting. Secondly, I suspect what you're gonna see is a lot of use of certificate-based training in the accounting area. I'm not saying CPAs go away. I am saying you may have relatively fewer CPAs in companies going forward, and relatively more use of technology and of people with certificate training who then work with the CPAs. In other words, it's I think a great example of how technology is changing the model of how we deliver the service. So we clearly still need your services. I talked to my accountant the other day about taxes for last year, and glad to have her and her advice on it. But again, the way in which it's actually delivered to me is likely to change pretty radically over the future. And again, I think accounting is one of the places where we're going to see it. It also means, of course, that if we're just thinking about what we're going to do in 4-year schools is offer or thinking now of UTK, where we have the 5-year, 150-hour degree. How many people are gonna be willing to bundle together this entire package versus doing some certificate education in the accounting area, saving a few years of their life, earning an income, saving less tuition? I think that, again, accounting is a great example of what I'm talking about.
I agree with everything you said, because technology is a driving force. I also see less students wanting to do the 150 hours so they can take CPA exam. I'm not
Yeah,
sure, because.
And I think that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, because I'm over 25, let's say. I'm not sure technology, even looking at my younger staff, saves us time as much as it offers us more of an opportunity to look at things and potentially investigate more stuff. I'm not sure it's a time saver as much as it gives us an opportunity to do a better job. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think your point is valid. You think about health, I'll use healthcare as an example now. You know, technology changes in healthcare often don't save any time or money, right? What they do is give us better healthcare. And so accounting, again, another example of that. But I think, remember back to my slide showing what happened to the labor force from here, in aggregate, and likely including accounting, we don't have any choice. We're going to have to do the same jobs with relatively fewer workers, because there simply is not going to be enough people coming in to deliver the services. And so I think you'll find it necessary to both do your job better with more technology and accounting, but likely you'll have to have more technology just because you can't find enough workers. There's going to be fewer people coming out of 4-year schools than we've seen in the last couple of years, despite the fact that we're still, educating up the population with so many retirements of people who are less educated.
I agree with you, and also maybe we are an example as a vocation, because we're getting away from sending a staff for 8 hours to do CPE on inventory. We would rather give them a nano course that may be 30 minutes on how to count inventory. And that's much
I
more
was actually
useful.
talking to somebody about that kind of CPE the other day, and I apologize if I'm stepping on anybody's feet or toes, but a lot of people are just going through the motion, right? What you want is people who are getting skilled up in very specific things that you need them to do. And so in some sense, this is the question I'm posing. What is the role that higher education can play? And I'm thinking of Martin, I'm thinking of Knoxville campuses, I'm also thinking of the TCATs and the community colleges. What's the role that they can and should be playing in helping educate up, train up a population with things that are changing so fast? These little nano things you're wanting to teach, I'm guessing that a lot of them are because there's changes that you're wanting to educate them on. Well, guess what? You're not the only one that needs that. Is there a way we can deliver that kind of education, but I'm gonna put / training? If universities are gonna think of themselves as, we're only gonna deliver 4-year degrees and graduate degrees, it's gonna be a tough next 20 years for most schools.
Here, Martin Keith has put us on a path in trying to work with TCAT and some of the other what I call junior colleges, 2-year colleges, whatever you want to call them, which would seem to fall into your presentation as the right thing to do. But I guess my overarching question is, what path do we send Keith on so that UT Martin stays ahead of the curve?
Well, I think what Chancellor is doing is exactly what I'm arguing for. He and I didn't talk about what his plans are, so there's been no interaction on that at all. But I agree, that's where you need to go. And the challenge, I've spent my life at a 4-year school, okay, and I'm a tenured faculty member. And the challenge is getting us tenured guys to go along for the ride. I'm not saying it's simple, but guys, we're a stubborn lot. But it can't be a world in which we hire a bunch of non-tenured track faculty to do all the work we really need done, and we let the tenured faculty, have a slide on this thing. I mean, we need to transform, what we're we're delivering and how we're structuring ourselves. And I think, again, looking at stackable credentials is the terminology often used, is clearly a way that universities can do well. But we need to figure out also, again, not how do we hire up a bunch of untenured track people to do this, but how do we transition the basic product itself into a world that delivers skills that are marketable to people when they come out.
The same thing happens if you're a 67-year-old CPA also, as your tenured professor.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's not just higher ed.
Yes.
But I was recently in a meeting here on campus with some people who were kind of looking at how we transition things. And, you know, what you hear people saying is, well, as long as I can just teach my same class again, I'm happy. And, you know, we need to be a world that the world just changes too fast. My technology slide showing you the straight up line of how long it takes to adopt something. And universities have to increasingly be that. And so, again, I applaud you for thinking, how do we build credentials and training into what we're doing? And how do we make change rapid and consistent with what companies need today? Now, you know, it's going to be hard for universities to do what, and I don't know your accounting firm, but PwC or one of the large accounting firms would do in terms of just structuring its own training that narrowly meets its needs. But okay, so PwC can do that, but we have this whole range of other accounting companies out there that maybe can't gear up and just deliver their own accounting training and education. And so what role can Martin play in helping that whole set of other accounting firms participate and be skilled up at the same as PwC can do? I mean, I know some of our faculty work with companies like PwC. Why can't they also help us make sure that it's not just, you know, traditional kind of 8 hours of gap time, go through this kind of technical training, but where we're really helping people skill up.
We're trying to put together a project with TCAP and others to where we bring private industry in for research and development and things like that, which it sounds like to me is going down the right path for what you're predicting.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, you know, in the end, guys like me are never going to know exactly what a company needs as much as it does, right? They're sitting there every day. Now, there may be some technology things that our engineering folks can help them with that are state of the art. But in the end, and you know, our supply chain people may have some specialized knowledge, but in the end, they're very specific needs. They know better than we do. And so this kind of interactive role for education with business telling us what they need in real time and universities increasingly adapting to it has to be the model of the future. Or again, what's going to happen is the private sector will come in and do this. It's going to happen. Companies are going to need the skills that they need, or going to get the skills they need. And so the only question is whether we're going to be a part of that or not. And of course, if we're not, then our market share falls. And ultimately, we become less and less relevant.
I apologize, I've had questions from you guys.
No, I appreciate what you had to say. I think one of the concerns that I think you might hear from faculty is that they're concerned when we hear discussions like this. Now, I don't feel this way, but there are concerns that it sounds like you're becoming a trade school. And yet, I do think you've got to be flexible to meet the needs of society. We serve society.
Great point.
Yeah, you know, there can be a little bit of a sense at universities that you know, universities are here for the workers and not for our market. And again, I've spent my career in higher education. I'm not saying I've never had these same kind of thoughts of like, hey, this place is here for me. It's not here for me. It's here to you know, again, we're providing a whole range of things. We're not just educating undergraduate students, but we do need to be ever increasingly adaptable to meet what our clients' needs are, whether they're students or business or even the academic world. And it's going to require a rethinking, and I'm not saying an easy rethinking, but a rethinking of what the role of professors in universities. No question. You know, the governments, you know, for a long time in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, as higher education was growing so fast, governments were throwing much more money into it, letting us grow. This is not gonna happen going forward. And so for us to continue, you know, at least the size we are, we're going to have to do things differently and do things in ways that are entrepreneurial in terms of generating resources. And I appreciate there could be a little bit of argument that we've become a trade school, but guess what? The world's not willing to pay us to just sit around and teach, you know, whatever. And you know, I could throw out examples. I'm not, because I don't want to offend anybody. They might say the same thing about economics, but you know, they're not going to pay us just to educate something we think people ought to have. They're going to pay us to educate what the economy and people want.
Questions?
Any questions, Denise? Do you have any questions? I think she said no, she's on mute, but.
I would make the statement that in the industry I work in the last 20 years, we've spent a lot more money internally to educate educated people as they come into our process. And that seems to just grow every year. I will compliment, I work with a lot of UTM graduates, and I will compliment you, Keith, that your people educate new workers in a way that they are very trainable, okay? They're adapted to learning, but a lot of them don't know much about the real world experience. And they have to be trained that, and that's not a discount on the process. I think the process works really well, but they get to me and they're not there yet. And they have to be, you know, and granted, you don't know what I want, and you don't know what I want exactly, but, you know, I will say they're ready to be molded, but they're not quite there yet sometimes.
Hal, that's not.
If I can just make an appeal right there for internships, you know, involving our students in your business earlier in their career, both helps them and hopefully helps you, and helps you, you know, it's a good way to choose who you want to hire by seeing how they work out in an internship program. And so it's a good recruiting tool in many cases. But yeah, I mean, that's another way to help higher education be more effective.
And that's not exclusive just for the ag business. I mean, the same way with us. And I will say that here at Martin and Murray and Western Kentucky and some of the other Memphis, the schools of businesses at Martin have been better than the rest of them about approaching us and saying, what do you expect? And I don't expect them to be able to come out and do some of the stuff that we expect them to do, because there's a lot to learn. But they are trainable, I agree with you.
Very trainable.
Wholeheartedly there. And we've gone the route of interns. We probably, through the firm, have 40 interns this year. And what it is, it's about a 6-month interview process, because we figure out who we want and who we don't want.
And they figure out if they want you too.
Well, and yeah, we lose more. What do you think about that? Any other questions?
I would just like to say, Dr. Fox, I wish you were more enthusiastic about your content.
Yeah, well, I wish all of my content was just stuff I was happy about. You know, I wish the world could just stay the same and I could do whatever I want to do. But you know, it's fun to be part of the thinking process about where we go from here.
We want to really thank you for your presentation. It was very informative.
Thank you all very much for having me. It was certainly my privilege, and I wish you well in the rest of your meetings. And Keith, great to see you as always.
See you next month.
Okay, look forward to it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Government Relations and Advocacy, Ms. Carrie Whitworth, who is from East Tennessee, I understand, but married a man from Camden, Tennessee. So she's almost a West Tennessean, and if you know anything about Camden and you know anything about the Whitworths, there's more than one Whitworth over there in Camden. She is the UT Vice President for Governmental Relations and Advocacy, and so she's going to talk to us about those governmental relations and the advocacy for UT. Carrie?
Fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, Chancellor Carver, Chairman Sparks, for giving me an opportunity to speak with the advisory board today. To give you a bit of a legislative update, what's happening in Nashville, what we expect to happen this session. I'm going to skip this slide or just over it really briefly. This is your government relations team. Although we are a function of the system, please know we care very deeply for the Martin campus and are working very hard on its behalf. So I have the privilege of leading this group, and they're a really passionate team of advocates for the University of Tennessee system and our mission across the state. So how about the state of our state? Some context of where we are. We finished a session in 2021 last year where we saw a historic investment in higher education. And not just a historic investment for higher education broadly, but really an outsized portion of that investment benefiting the University of Tennessee system. We also saw full and unanimous passage, which is really rare, of a UT policy agenda, which got us more flexibility in chancellor searches, for example, and increased access to 4-H programs across the state of Tennessee. Heading into 2022, the state has a very strong financial outlook. As Dr. Fox noted, we may not be in this position forever, but for the time being, the state financial outlook is very strong for this budget year. We're in a position where state revenues are almost $1 billion more than budgeted estimates year to date. The state had about $4 billion in American Rescue Plan stimulus, and we have a record rainy day and TennCare reserves that we never had to dip into during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we started the legislative session. We were off with a bang last week, and we're getting close to some major milestones during the session. And this is a recently announced date, so my slide is not current, and apologies for that. But January 31st will be the governor's State of the State address. This is a big legislative milestone because the governor's budget proposal is also released on this date. This is kind of where we learn the initial proposed investments for the University of Tennessee, projects that we have been advocating for all summer and fall. We kind of see what the first round draft picks are going to be in terms of proposed funding. And in the state of Tennessee, generally speaking, the governor's proposed budget is a fairly good indicator of success. That's not to say that the legislature can't undo some of those investments. They certainly can, and they often do. But by and large, the governor's budget proposal is generally enacted by the General Assembly. If investments that are on the UT agenda do not make that initial budget, what the government relations team will do is assess those and work with the administration and key members of the legislature to make a play to see if we can get those in the administration's budget amendment, which comes later in the year, usually around March. It kind of sizes up investment or scales them back depending on how state revenue is doing. And then, of course, we can work on a series of member budget amendments as well, although those are more difficult and often have slimmer odds of success. They can be successful. I'll tell you, it's going to be a quick session this year because it is an election year, and we are also in the process of redistricting. So members will have new districts that they need to work for the August primaries and the November general election. Meaning, it's very difficult to campaign while they are in session, and so I think there's a pretty strong will to get out by mid-April, and that's when I think we'll see a budget passed, finalized legislative action, and then adjournment. The University of Tennessee tracks a wide number of policy issues during the session. If you think about the university and its scope and its impact across the state, we are tracking everything from legislation that impacts the university as a public employer, benefits for UT employees, traditional academic issues like what can be taught in the classroom, or things that might impact our accreditation. We are also dealing with things that impact the way our buildings are built, capital projects themselves, campus safety, so on and so forth. And so we end up with a very large net of issues that we track. Out of 2,000 bills that are generally filed each session, UT tracks and engages on roughly a third of those. So there is a lot of work to be done. There is no way we could talk about every single issue today. So really, I'm going to focus my presentation on our 2022 agenda and ways that we might work together to advance some projects that are specific to the UT Martin campus. So it's a big year for capital projects because of the financial position that the state of Tennessee finds itself in. We have significant revenues, as I mentioned, and they're viewed as non-recurring for the state. So there's a significant amount of one-time money available for projects, and we would argue capital projects are a great way to spend one-time money. So we have 3 top capital priorities for the UT system, and these have been ranked by the UT Board of Trustees, just for context. UT Chattanooga's Health Science Building. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo.
Carrie, you sound,
Dr. Carpenter,
you,
is
yeah,
that okay on your end?
you sound great on our end, yes.
Okay, thank you. UT Chattanooga Health Sciences Facility is the system's top capital project priority, followed by the UT Martin Test Hub project. And then our third priority is a business building on the Knoxville campus. We have a bit of a challenge before us, I believe, in that, after the Board of Trustees ranks capital projects, they go through a secondary ranking process by the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. 2 projects made that THEC list. That's the Chattanooga Health Sciences Building and the UT Knoxville College of Business Building. Despite making the list last year, the UT Martin project did not make the THEC list. We are working very hard to find out why that happened, and we are working to kind of overcome those odds, if you will. One thing I will tell you that we have learned, and many of you likely know this, but the THEC process ran prior to the Blue Oval City announcement being made in West Tennessee. We believe that certainly has significance on this project, and we will continue advocating for the project for funding from the administration and the legislature. As far as our 2022 policy agenda, so moving outside of the investment space for just a moment, we really have 3 major legislative initiatives that we're taking on. The first is an effort that we certainly hope will not be controversial. We really view it as doing the right thing. And it's an effort to allow Tennessee public universities to award in-state tuition for military-affiliated students. So even if a military-affiliated student resides out of state, they will be able to attend a University of Tennessee school at the in-state rate. This legislation would certainly cover veteran students, but also those enrolled in seeking to enroll in our ROTC programs across the UT system. And it was a policy proposal that was discussed by all of the chancellors over the fall. And pending the legislature passes this initiative, it is something that system-wide we intend to do. The second piece of legislation is just a follow-up on last year's agenda, where we were successful in adding a new university to the UT family with UT Southern in Southern Middle Tennessee. We've got technical corrections to add to the code, where we just insert UT Southern into the UT code section of the code book. Should be very technical in nature and non-controversial as well. The third piece on our agenda is really taking a good look at name, image, and likeness issues as they relate to student athletes. a changing dynamic nationwide. Congress has not acted on a federal NIL solution, and so you have 50 different state laws impacting college student athletics, and that creates an environment where states are in fact competing against one another to make sure that their laws are in the most competitive position, and so that their athletics programs can be in the most competitive position. So we're taking a hard look at that. We will have some sort of name, image, and likeness bill. I'll tell you, it continues to evolve as states take various policy approaches, even as recently as last week. So it's just something that we continue to work on. Other significant budgetary requests that the university will be pursuing this session. We started an initiative seeking funding for the UT Oak Ridge Innovation Institute. This is really a kind of a high-tech workforce development project that seeks to grow PhD, joint PhD students at Oak Ridge National Lab to 500 students over the next 10 years. It's a very significant investment by the state of Tennessee, $80 million over that 10-year period. Last session, we were successful in securing $8 million in startup funding for this initiative. And this year, given the strong revenues that the state has, we are going to make a request for a larger upfront investment so that we can reach the project goals sooner for this request. We are also have a funding request in system-wide for support for an enterprise resource planning system across the University of Tennessee. Our ERP system is nearing its end of life, and so we have to make a change and an investment in those kind of IT infrastructure systems. It is a very expensive operation, so system-wide, this is a $50 million non-recurring investment, but it is one that if we can, if we can secure the state's assistance in funding this, it will alleviate much of the pressure on our institutions as it relates to possible tuition increases, et cetera, down the road. And then, of course, Dr. Carver, we are still working on securing funds for the Grove demolition project at UT Martin. Many of you know that Representative Tandy Darby and Senator John Stevens were instrumental last year in securing some initial funding for that project. We've got a bit of a ways to go, so we will continue doing that this year in hopes of being able to close the book and really move the ball on the demolition project as well. So that's where I'm going to end my formal presentation. I would love to take questions from the group and know that you'll have some. So I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see you and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? I might ask, it was my understanding in last year's budget that the university was able to do a lot more of their deferred maintenance. How has that progressed, and how caught up are we on deferred maintenance?
Well, that's a great point. Yes, the state of Tennessee made a significant investment in deferred maintenance, probably the largest that they made in recent history last year. I think that's a move made by this administration. It's philosophy, I believe, of this administration that taking care of deferred maintenance is a real priority. So I always hate to predict what an administration is going to do, but I am hopeful that we will see continued investments of scale in deferred maintenance programs. I will also say, to your question of how caught up are we, I think the chancellor would agree with this, but never enough. We are never caught up all the way on deferred maintenance, and so there's a long way to go. And universities certainly have a long list of capital maintenance requests that are in for funding for the state. I didn't highlight those today because typically things like roofs and HVAC facts don't typically excite people, but I really appreciate the question.
You might get Dr. Fox to talk to the university about the test lab and all here at UT Martin, because he seemed to indicate that's the way to, for us to proceed. Just an
Yeah,
idea.
that's a great suggestion, and, one thing we are working on, and this is certainly something that I know, we would appreciate, Dr. Carver's team, I'm sure would appreciate, but, demonstrating community and business support for Test Hub, is going to be an important part of this process. So we are certainly working on that. We've got some ideas on how to do that in an effective way. And so would love this group's help in those endeavors down the road.
Any questions?
Just one quick comment. Carrie, this is Keith, just want to thank you again. I know you're doing great work on behalf of the system, but you're really, you always are so willing to help out UTM. And what you're doing with Test Hub and your continued advocacy and push, both overtly and covertly, we really appreciate. And while we're on record, and Edie's taking minutes, would you let us know who's your favorite UT campus?
I love it. I love all my UT campuses, but only one has made me an honorary West Tennessean. I'll just say that.
Okay. That's right. Edie, if you would reflect that in the notes, that would be great. That would be great.
You're always welcome here at our meetings or to UT Martin.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Carrie. See you tomorrow.
All right, sounds great.
Bye.
Thank you. Next, we have our 2022 Title IX update. Excuse me, Dr. Ashley Blamey is going to talk us through that, and she is the UT Title IX coordinator. Ashley, you're still on mute.
Here we go.
There you go.
Thank you for having me, and I think you should be able to see my presentation right now, and it should be part of your book as well. I'm going to be fairly brief. I think there are a couple of highlights that I want you all to know specifically, and then I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions that you may have. There's been a fair amount of news in this area recently, and so there may be some things that you want to ask questions about, and I'm happy to answer those. We're going to briefly talk through the definition of Title IX, which is ever expanding and retracting. We'll talk through just some regulatory updates and a Title IX timeline. Talk about UT Martin's Title IX commitment, which fits in sort of the broader scope of the system Title IX commitment, and try to tell the future a little bit about in this area. Title IX, and we've discussed this historically, and typically I think try to discuss it once a year. It is a fairly brief paragraph that has expanded through court and other litigation to bring us to where we are today and what Title IX looks like for higher education. Also has a huge impact on K-12 as well, but we'll stay narrowly focused on higher education and just some of the things that I think it's important as a board for you to be aware of that the campus has a responsibility around, but I think as a board also to be aware of the context in which our students, faculty, and staff are living right now with regard to this issue. I always start with Pat Summit because she was a Skyhawk and because she is one of my favorite Tennesseans, but her impact in her life is just sort of the timeline of Title IX, and so I won't go into all that, but for those of you who haven't seen that before, it's a fantastic journey through what Title IX has done and continues to do specifically for the state of Tennessee. So I'll drop down to, if you look at 2017, 2020, and 2022 at the bottom of the timeline, just some important updates that apply to UTM as well as the other campuses within the system. And so in 2017, the NCAA issued a campus sexual violence policy. There are aspects of that policy that were deferred until later, and all of those will come due in May of this year. We work closely with compliance on each campus. Ashley Bynum is the leadership on your campus in athletics compliance for this issue. And there are training components, there are reporting components, and there are portal requirements around this. And so we are all monitoring and doing the work we need to comply, but it is something that we are watching and is evolving, especially in light of the name, image, and likeness. There'll be evolution around that as well. 2020, we had new Title IX regulations were issued in May, and we implemented those in August. Much of our presentation last year was about that implementation process. Martin did a fantastic job, and always, and Keith Carver knows I feel this way about Martin, but I just think the level of teamwork and really commitment to the right thing is just outstanding at Martin. It's harder, I think, at Martin than it is at other places because of the constraints of just your human resource. But what you don't have a human resource, you make up 100 times in heart. And so we have seen just an incredible amount of work in this area over the last couple of years, including Dr. Margaret Toaston, who came back out of retirement to help us in this interim period while you all begin the search for a full-time Director of Equity, Diversity, and Title IX coordinator. And then again, because we did it a couple of years ago, we'll do it again. The notice of proposed rulemaking is expected by April of 2022. Title IX, and I think this is the future as well, will be driven oftentimes by the White House and initiatives around this area. And so I think we're going to just expect every 4 to 8 years to be looking at this area and an evolution to take place. I've said to a lot of people, it was a lot the first time we did it because we hadn't done it really since 1972 in a significant way on campuses and in a format like that happened in 20, but we did it and it was a lot of work, and I think we can do it again in a more systematic way because we've had that experience before. So that's just something that's on the horizon. We outline our Title IX commitment in these ways, and we do that because it helps the institutions to maintain focus on the areas that are required not only for compliance, but required to create an environment that we can feel comfortable that we are doing everything within our power to create safety. And that's for all students. So if we look at our policy, we moved to basically a system-wide policy last year with campus level customization. So Martin's process looks like Knoxville's process, as does Southern. So it's nice because I think we meet twice a month, and I think in those meetings you really see, because we're all working from the same policy, you really see the ability to help each other and to access resources across the system. So I think that is something that really was a great outcome last year. Working on prevention and education is always an area we feel like that we can grow and improve. Coordinating that work has been something that UTM has done in sort of a decentralized way, and as you move and hire this new position, I think you're going to get a really centralized area for this work, and I'm really excited about that. And again, this is an area that across the system everyone is doing work in, so there's always an opportunity to share resources. Support and intro measures that the work that keeps a student enrolled while they're in this process, keeps them accessing their education, and that goes for complainants and respondents, is critical to us. Investigations and resolutions and patterns and trends are all part of this sort of holistic approach to this work. At UT Martin, just give you a couple policy highlights because I think some of this kind of came up last year, and there's been clarity over the last year on how it's going to look and how it actually functions. And so UT Martin's policy covers both Title IX and non-Title IX issues if they fall under any of the boxes that you see on your screen. So sexual exploitation is included as well. It's not part of the Title IX regulation, but it is part of what our campus policies cover. The policies apply to faculty, staff, and students, and they include the key components of the regulation which are applied across the board. So our standard of evidence, right to an advisor, investigation, live hearing, cross-examinations, and appeal rights. And just to see the case flow, we tried to keep it very we want a complementary case flow in all of our investigations, and the goal of that is that people know what to expect, that we've got, I think in this area and in this work generally, if you can set expectations and follow those and make a really clear, transparent process, you avoid sort of 80% of the challenges in this work, and I think that's something that UTM has done a really nice job with their policy and also with their process this year. Over the course of this year, UTM has done one of the things that I think will help the institution moving forward in this area, probably more than any other thing, is to transition to Maxient. Maxient is a system that's used by Knoxville, UT Chattanooga, It's in consideration for the other campuses. And what Maxine does is give you a sort of a single location for all your documents, information, and transactions around a case. And what that does is just reduce risk. And so you've got a systematic way of keeping information, documentation, and it is shareable among offices. And it also creates a single repository, so if there's ever a question about a case, you've got a single record and a single system that should reflect all of the contact a student, faculty, or staff has for your campus. And I'm a big fan of Maxion, so we were an early adopter, but it is the best on the scene for this type of work and this type of tracking. It also does content work in a number of other areas. Housing utilizes it. It's just across the board a really great resource. UTM launched annual Title IX training. We have an audit and compliance board of trustees meeting in February, approximately a week before the board of trustees meeting, and we'll report there on Title IX training data for each campus. Martin is not where they want to be as far as their percentage yet, but I expect in the next 2 weeks we'll get there. So that outcome and percentage will be presented at the board of trustees audit compliance committee, but Martin will obviously have that data before it goes there. Again, I talked about the team, but I can't undersell what you have going, and I am very excited for this new hire, this opportunity to bring in someone who is dedicated to this work and kind of wakes up every day thinking about a certain niche of the campus so that they are driving this process. You've seen resource updates. I think the clarification of protocols for students is one of the best things that you could do. It's a pretty low level thing to get done, and it also just, I always say, let's get out of our own way, and it's one of those things that definitely moves us out of our own way. We also did training for hearing officers. Title IX compliance requires hearing officers to overhear any adjudication of cases. Martin gave us 30. Each campus, we had at least 3 from each campus trained to be a hearing officer. They can hear cases on their campus, but are probably more likely to hear a case on another campus. It was a real critical position in our policy structure. We made the hearing officer role for our cases a very important and sort of the driving force around our entire process. And so we needed the right people from the right places, and Martin was generous with that. And I feel ready that if and when Martin gets to a Title IX hearing, that we're prepared and we have hearing officers available and ready to do that work. UTM has a case review team. They meet weekly. Again, made some really good new hires on that team. You've got Ann Joyner, who is Assistant General Counsel. I'm sure you've met her. She's going to be a great addition to that team. And again, Dr. Tostin, who served in the interim Title IX role, will be leaving in February, assuming we've got a next fit. But she has been outstanding in coming in and doing the work and keeping the trains moving on time while we find the next right fit. The future of this work, I think, is continued transparency. We are at 50 years of Title IX, and the evolution has been fascinating and continues to be. We are currently in the system looking at the 2017 system-wide evaluation of Title IX that Dr. Joe DiPietro commissioned at that time. We are evaluating each campus to determine where they are in that, since the time frame of that audit. That will also be part of the Board of Audit and Compliance Board of Trustees meeting in February. We are also layering that with the 2019 State Comptroller's Audit. So looking at what do we know from our history, what have we made adjustments to, what can we let go of, and just acknowledge we are not going to do this with the regulatory shift. Some of those things are happening. And then what are our next goals? And so that's what that project is doing, and Martin has done some outstanding work and made great progress there. What we are asking faculty and staff to do in training, and students as well to a lesser degree, but faculty and staff for sure, is to set the expectation. The greatest risk to a campus are the people that we employ. If students come on a campus and do a behavior, there are limitations to what we could have done or could have known. When we employ someone and give them access to our students, other faculty and staff, our campus facilities, we are taking a risk. And so one of the things that we talk a lot about is setting that risk expectation from the very beginning when we hire somebody. This is what Martin believes, this is how we interact with each other, and just acknowledging changes in culture. There are work culture and university cultures that have changed, and I would argue for the better, but like some of the presentation before talked about, that in all areas, change happens and people have to learn to adapt and adopt, and to do that, they really have to be encouraged, and it also has to be a top-down message, which Chancellor Carver has always and consistently done in a way that I think if someone chooses to fall outside of that expectation, it's a choice, and it's not for lack of effort or knowledge about the expectation. We always encourage people to address the known secrets. These are more departmental issues where you get into, oh, that's so-and-so, he's always that way, she always makes those jokes, they always say this. It's sort of addressing, like, we can't manage someone else's behavior. I often say, I work with a person who never went to the University of Tennessee, but wants their child to go to Martin, and they work, a minimum wage job to get them there. I work for that person. And for that person, the expectation is that the environment should be a place where everyone can put their energy towards what we're paying them to do versus their energy towards managing someone else's behavior. Increases in campus level training, which Martin is in the process of doing, and then assessing the climate. And that is a piece that I think that we all have some work to do, and so that'll be a recommendation moving forward. We're looking at a type of climate assessment around this area, and what do students report, what do faculty and staff need, and how knowledgeable are they about the resources. And the other part of the future is compliance. National Science Foundation, NASA, National Institutes for Health, USDA, which Martin has some grant funding related to that. All of these areas are setting very clear expectation for grant funding. And so they are not going to partner with institutions that will not comply with their expectations. And their expectations are the federal government expectations plus. And so it's an interesting message, and I think it's actually probably how you see the greatest culture shift, is when the money follows what the organization says their values are. So NASA for sure, NSF, we've already seen huge changes with them. They want reports and are requiring reports if you have a PI or co-PI who's violated a policy or has an adjustment duty. So it is, like all the other things I feel like we talked about today, a work in progress and ever-changing field. But I think that one of the most important things that you all do around this area is keep the conversation going. I think there's never going to be well, take that off our list, we're done. But I think there are opportunities to keep the conversation going, and that there's always a chance to further consider what might be helpful and useful in this area. So that is sort of the presentation component. I am happy to answer questions or think through anything that you all have an interest in today.
Ashley, I have a question which probably surprises everybody. This is not meant to be a political statement, which I said that to get Keith's attention and to get Ann Joyner's attention. They can both hit me if they want to. The NCAA right now appears to have some things going on within their different sports, mainly swimming. Is that a Title IX issue, or what's going to happen? And I'm not making a political statement, I'm just saying, what's going to happen?
Well, some big things happened yesterday as far as they are moving toward individual sport evaluation. It is a Title IX issue. It's not typically something the Office of Title IX or your Title IX coordinator has to deal with, because we're following structures set out by the NCAA or the Olympic Committee. And so what it looks like right now, and that was a decision made yesterday, it looks like they're moving towards more of the individualized sport evaluation, and they're looking at using, I think, more of a structure like the Olympic Committee uses at this time. I think as far as predicting the future in that area, anybody's guess is as good as mine. I think that it is one that we'll watch, and I think that ultimately individual institutions are going to comply with whatever their governing body is, but it's going to be an interesting conversation.
It was an important decision yesterday, but I sort of stepped back and looked at it as more or less kicking the can down the road. Because I'm not sure anybody wants to make a decision, and I certainly understand that. That's a tough deal. By the way, Pat was not ever a Skyhawk, she was a Pacer. But if you want to leave her as a Skyhawk, that's fine. And Betty Giles, we should bring up Betty's name, because Betty probably started the women's sports and things like that even before Pat got into it, and Pat was certainly influenced by Ms. Guerin and Ms. Giles both. We're very proud of that. You might say Title IX started at UT Martin.
I would give it credit for the state of Tennessee. Her work to help move women to full court basketball alone changed our full trajectory, so absolutely.
Any questions for Ashley?
Ashley, just a quick comment from me. Thank you for the great resource you are. I know our team loves working with you, and thank you for your kind comments on our team. I like the group we've got around the table right now. Really look forward to next 30, 60 days, bring in a permanent Title IX director. Really appreciate Margaret Toston coming out of retirement to help us out in a tough time, and she's done great work, and but our whole team. But you probably heard me ask Carrie Whitworth who her favorite campus was, and I know that 50% of your salary is paid by the Knoxville campus and the other part by the UT system. So I won't ask you, but I'll just say that I know who your favorite campus is.
That's totally fine.
Okay.
And you might be right.
It's West. That's right. Okay. All right. Ashley, we appreciate you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Okay. I think our next item on the agenda are any comments by our learned chancellor
Fantastic.
or Keith.
Thank you
whichever.
that's right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate you all being here, investing your time. And we did not know 3 years ago how this would work out, how our advisory boards would go. But I have been so pleased with the governor's appointments, really pleased with how the faculty have done their selections and the students presented their selections. And I just think we've got a great group. And Moniz, we'd love for you to be here with us, but it's great to see you on the screen. And do you affiliate more with Pacers or Skyhawks?
Pacers.
Okay.
You're trying to date me.
No. I mean, I was giving you a chance there, Moniz, giving you a chance. But in all seriousness, your work is so important, and it's important to me, and I appreciate the phone calls and the email and the counsel that you guys provide all of us. A few quick updates. Obviously, let's start with COVID. Let's go with our low point. We have yesterday we set a record for COVID cases on this campus. They've increased quite a bit. We started out last week and have made jumps, and over 120 yesterday. About 25 cases in our faculty and staff. That's really bad news. The good news is, fortunately, our cases, we have not so far had any that we would classify in our student population as severe. A lot of sore throats, a lot of headaches, but again, one case is too many. I really want to pause and thank our faculty and our staff for being back, working through this face-to-face. And as Dr. Cavalier and our deans will tell you, every day is different. Philip Smart will tell you every day is different. You just don't know on any given day how many students are going to be impacted by this, and how you're going to teach that class. And heaven forbid our faculty member gets sick and have to ask someone to pinch hit. But let me tell you about this campus is people are really helping each other out. And the stories I hear from our students, by and large, overwhelming majority is my faculty members are helping me out. And I really appreciate that. And they're giving me some grace. And I don't brag on them enough, but they're doing a great job. And all of our folks that are supporting our students and faculty on the staff side are doing a great job. And we're trying our best to manage and walk through. We do not have a requirement. We cannot have a requirement for masks on campus. We are highly recommending when people are indoors, can't be physically distanced, to wear a mask. And really stressing that hard these first 2 or 3 weeks of school. But we have, it's been a tough start, but it's been a good start, and I'm encouraged. Knoxville, Chattanooga we started a week ago Thursday. Chattanooga and Southern started this Tuesday. Knoxville starts next week, and I'll be honest, I'm glad we went ahead and just started when we did. And Dr. Smart, I'm glad you're shaking your head. That was to go ahead and get going and try to get this figured out. So, but it's been tough. I really want to thank, too, our student health people, and really working long hours to try to keep our students healthy and safe and tested, and it's been great. As we talked about at lunch, there's about 1 million less students going to college in January of 2022 as there were in January 2020. And we certainly felt that. We are, when you look fall to spring, we're down over 350 students. That's not really out of the ordinary. Usually have a few or less students in the spring than fall. We are excited about how things look for the summer and fall. When you look at our housing applications, and that's students that fill out the application, some cases put down deposits, those applications are up 54% over this time last year. It means something to us when a student sends in some money to hold a room, and that really is usually a good sign that they're coming. So that's really good. Additionally, another great sign is students who submitted a FAFSA, applicants who filled out and completed their FAFSA, and we have that. We're able to work through their financial aid package. This time last year, only 49% of our applicants had submitted that and turned it into us, and this year we're at 53%. So two really good signs. We're doing events. We're taking our campus to students, to prospective students. We've been to Jackson, we've been to Nashville, we're going to Memphis, we're going to go to Dyersburg, and we have huge numbers coming out to that. We try to spread folks out, but our deans have been great about coming out, talking to students and parents. Many are coming and just want to find out more about the financial aid packet or more information on the residence hall room. Some are undecided, and I'm talked to a student at Jackson on Wednesday night. We were in Jackson, and they were trying to figure out, Tuesday night, they're trying to figure out if I'm coming to Martin or coming to UTC. And so events like that are important. Did get an email from that student's mother yesterday. That student's coming here. And I'm not sure if the yield event helped with that one, but it did not hurt to be there in Jackson and be able to do that. And I may have promised her a home-cooked meal at our house if she comes, which is always good. We're spending a lot of time as a campus and as a community on our master plan. We're looking ahead at the next 5 to 10 years. We heard Dr. Fox talk about physical spaces, how important physical space is. Do you need new buildings? What do you need to do to your existing buildings? So we're looking at that, talking about enrollment trends. We're talking to students like Kelsey. We're talking to our faculty like Dr. Smart, alumni, local business folks. The things you're hearing is we want to make our campus more user-friendly, functional, inviting to the community, but also inviting for students and bringing on new faculty and staff. So we'll probably look, Chairman, of the fall to do a presentation on what came out of the master plan and ask for you. We will ask for you all to look at that and give us your thoughts on that. Big thing coming up in terms of how we think about campus culture here. In February, we do an annual Civil Rights Conference. We've done that for better parts of 3 decades. Would love for you all to come out, and I'll make sure, Edie and I'll make sure you get an invite on February 12th. You all are familiar with the Centoya Brown story, death row inmate who turned out that was a wrongful conviction. Governor Haslam gave her a stay, and she's out and going to tell her story. And she's coming here on 12th. She's going to spend a day with our students and faculty in different classes, and then do a big public lecture at night. And we'll have her trial lawyer will be here with her, Houston Gordon, who's also a UT Martin grad, UT Law School grad. He'll be here as well, and he'll talk about it from his side, about that death row case. I have also invited the former governor, Bill Haslam. If he can make it, he will, because he's not been able to see her much since he granted that. So it would be an exciting night and certainly groundbreaking in terms of the legal decision. Quickly, I want to brag on our student athletes and brag on our athletic department. We talked about at lunch, but for 4 consecutive semesters, athletics has shattered the record for cumulative GPA. And so when you're talking about our student athletes and 500 of them, and these students have full-time jobs basically with practice and their playing schedules, but also carrying 15, sometimes 18 more hours. It's amazing, but for those students cumulatively around 3.3, that's absolutely remarkable, and really appreciate our leadership there, but also our faculty and staff that work with them, and our student athletes are great. Last year, you look at 2021, we won a golf championship, a regular season soccer championship, and an OVC football championship, and right now, we're #1 in the Ohio Valley Conference in terms of the Commissioner's Cup, in terms of our all-sports performance and how we're recognized. And so we can't say enough of those. Phil, did I brag too much about Kurt?
Yes.
Okay. But anyway, Kurt and our folks are doing just a fantastic job. Just a couple more things, just real exciting. In February, we'll bring on our very first retention director. We've hired someone stealing away from MTSU. They're going to come here and be waking up every day, making sure that all of us are thinking about what we're doing to make sure our students are successful and retain at UTM. And so this is groundbreaking for us. We've never had one, so we're excited about that. Also, the Ford announcement. Exciting for everybody, but when you think about the influx of jobs and opportunities into West Tennessee, we're at every table that we can be talking about what we can offer in terms of education and training, and trying to parlay not only our physical location, but also the location of our centers, our off-campus regional centers, and how they can help. And you look at somewhere like UT Martin Somerville, it's 11 miles from the entrance up there. So being a part of that and being at the table is very exciting. Finally, I just want to close with our alums and all of you and supporters. When you look at our capital campaign, announced it last year, $175 million goal. We're already at $158 million of that, and it truly is remarkable the support that we have. Charlie Deal wanted me to announce today that he would like, with our advisory board, to close that gap to 175, just in this room right now. But I told him I wouldn't say that. So, but in truth, we are grateful. I told Charlie earlier today I was going to announce unofficially, Art, that I thought we need to go to 250.
Did you say close to 175 million, or collect $175? Which one was that?
Oh, close to 175 million. Okay. Would you rather collect $175?
I'd rather just give Charlie 175.
That's exactly. Well, we're going to be close that out, this year. But obviously, I think we can go further beyond that. And I want to thank you all for your support. You are great supporters of this board. Moniz, thank you so much. You guys are not only give us your voice, but you help us financially, and that does not go unnoticed by me. So with that, I'll yield my time, be happy to answer any questions.
What about the Latimer building? How's it going?
The Latimer building is coming along fine. Shadow, I think, is over there about 12 hours a day. Dean Robinson is watching. We fully intend, it's going to be tight. We have not had major delays, but just as you do with construction problems, little hiccups, but we're basically on time. We are on budget, and plan to be teaching students in there next fall, which is really exciting. Really exciting. I think right now what Dr. Robinson's most worried about is the brand of coffee and espresso that's going to be in the coffee shop there.
Every day, every meeting.
Every day, every meeting. That's what he's talking about. So, Dr. Robinson, would you like to say anything about the Latimer building?
No, I think when we walk groups through to show them the facility, and I'd love to show it to the advisory board at some point, the sense of the sort of transformative
maybe we could have on May 20th when we come back, possibly go through the building.
That'd be great.
I think that would be good. That's the first classroom facility built at UB.
4 decades.
In 4 decades, unbelievable, unbelievable. I'm trying to follow each script here. Can you tell us about the Clement Hall move?
Everyone's really excited about moving to Clement. Actually, Clement was under construction renovation when I arrived here in 2017. We're just about now to start moving folks in. So we'll have people from admissions, records, financial aid, bursar's office over there, and it will create a one-stop shop for our students. When they come in and get a tour, immediately when they get back, they can go and talk to someone in financial aid. So we're really excited about that. It will be overcrowded, though, because as soon as we move some people out of Hall Moody administration into that building, the rest of us from Hall Moody will be leaving for different parts of campus because we're doing a complete mechanical upgrade to the administration building. And so we'll be nomads for at least a year, maybe more. So I'm going to get to know the third floor of Clement Hall really well. And I think Dr. Cavalier and I are sharing a desk in office. Real excited about that.
There were some guys when I went to school that knew the third floor rather well.
Oh, is that right? Was that a female floor when you were in school? That's where the women were?
What about, I think you honored the Walker family.
We did. As you all know, Danny Walker, longtime faculty member here, but great alum, great veterinarian. Hope he's not listening to hear me say really super nice things about him. But one of the greatest teachers and mentors we have here for decades. The Walker family has allowed us to lease their farm, to utilize it basically for whatever we wanted to do, Dr. Smart over there. They've let us do it and have just been great friends of it. And so the Farm Access Road, we just had renamed to honor not just Danny and Susie, but his father, Rayful, and mother, Mr. and Miss Walker, to name it after them. So it was a touching, moving moment, and certainly Miss Walker had no idea we were going to honor her husband, but it was a great day.
Good. I think you've about covered everything that Edie told me to make sure you covered. How's that?
That's great. Edie and Ann keep me straight, so.
There you go. There you go. Again, I'm sure if Julia was here, she would express appreciation for the governor for reappointments. Looks like you're going to be stuck with Julia and myself for another 4 years, but maybe we won't do anything to mess things up too badly. I appreciate everyone's time today driving here. Monique, I appreciate your time of taking time out of your day. I appreciate all the people behind me for keeping the university going and doing a great job.
Amen.
And we're extremely lucky here at UT Martin to have the faculty and staff and chancellor. That hurts me to say, but we're lucky. How are we doing on Crockett County recruitment?
Well, I'll tell you, it's up this year.
Okay.
The numbers up at our yield event the other night. We had 9 there from Crockett County. Of course, there was also not a ball game, and Dairy Queen was closed, so it's probably something to do.
I understand.
Come to Jack.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, May the 20th. I'm assuming we'll be at noon and probably here at 1 o'clock. Hopefully we can get a tour through the new engineering building, or it won't be complete, but probably be far enough that we can see how spectacular it's going to be. Anything that wants to be brought up by any of the advisory board members? Any questions, any comments?
Had one slight comment. When the slide popped up there earlier today about the Grove demolition, Grove meant those big, beautiful trees out there. Oh, no, surely we're not taking all our trees down. Then every Grove Apartments came to me. So my pressure went back down.
Now, I think you're going to try to turn that into a green space.
Absolutely. Some open space, informal recreation, tailgating, should be really nice.
So will it rival Ole Miss's Grove?
It will be better. With your help, Art, it will be better.
Okay, we're in trouble. If there is no other business to be brought forth, in fact, I I knew what it was.
I did
but-
too, after the first about 5 seconds in there.
Do I hear a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
We'll have to have and there's a second, thank you, Hal. We'll have to have a roll call vote for that, I believe.
No, we're good now on that.
Okay,
Yes, thank you.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
See ya.